Hello everybody and welcome to Omnipoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. I'm Jack and today I'm here with another Sun and Moon deck analysis for you guys. This one, as you can see, is going to be on a more straight Solgaleo build. We're not pairing it with many other things, we're more focusing on Solgaleo himself. So starting us off, we do have 4 Cosmogs. Cosmog is the lowest form of Solgaleo. Pretty simple card, Psychic type, 60 HP. His only attack is just collect for draw a card. It's nothing major, but at least it's like a usable attack rather than a 1 energy for 10 or whatever. It's at least a semi-decent attack. We've got two Cosmoem. Again, 90 HP stage 1, we're just running them pretty much to be able to evolve into Solgaleo. Again, his attack is Teleport, which switches him from the active to the bench, so it's not useless. It could get you out of a pinch if you're Lysandred up, but very rare that we're going to be using this attack. On to the star of the show, we've got 4 Solgaleo GX. Now, the GX mechanic, for anyone that's unaware, I've been explaining in each of the videos so far, just to make sure everyone knows how the GX mechanic works going into this format. So it's very similar to the EX mechanic. You take 2 prizes when you knock out a GX. However, 1, GXs can be evolutions, as you can see, so this is a stage 2 GX card. And 2, they all have a GX attack, which is an attack you can use 1 GX attack per game, and usually this attack is going to have a really powerful effect. And in Solgaleo's case, I think it genuinely has one of the best GX attacks we've seen so far. Really strong, and that's what we're going to be basing the deck around. So a little bit more on Solgaleo. He's got 250 HP, which is huge for a stage 2. Even for a stage 2, that's still pretty nuts. As you can tell, these GX cards have a lot of HP. Weak to fire, resistant to psychic, and 3 retreat. And he has an ability, an attack, and his GX attack. So his ability, Ultra Road, says you may switch your benched Pokemon with your active Pokemon with one of your benched Pokemon once per turn. So essentially it's a free switch per turn, which is, it seems really simple, but it's such a strong ability. It means we can't be Lysandre stalled. We can't be stalled by things like Fright Knight that are locking at our tools, our float stones, things like that. We can always get out of the active if we're going to get knocked out next turn. We can always, if we can power up another attacker, we can force our opponent to try and find a Lysandre to take prizes. It's just such a simple but really powerful ability. His attack, for his regular attack for 2 metal and a colourless, does 230 damage, and you discard all energy attached to Solgaleo. So 230 for 3 energy is a huge amount of damage. We're going to be one-shotting a lot in the format. As you can see, these guys have 250 HP, but not all of the GXs have 250 HP. And also, we've still got EXs in the format, and they sort of only have up to around 190 usually. The Megas usually have a bit more, but very rarely will it be over 230. So we're one-shotting a lot of things in this format. And then that's why you have to discard all of your energy once you've used this attack. 3 energy it's not costly for 230 damage, but it can be difficult to get on to sort of attach it all. And that's where we're going to use his GX attack. His GX attack for 1 metal energy, Soul Burst GX, lets you search your deck for 5 energy, not 5 basic energy, 5 energy, so that you can get special energy, and attach them to your Pokemon in any way you like. And this is just nuts. It means if you can manage to get a turn 2 Soul Burst, you can have 7 energy on the board. You've attached 1 for your first turn, you've attached 1 for your second turn, and then you've Soul Burst 5 on. So on turn 2 you can have 7 energy on, which is just nuts. And because we can get special energy as well, this is more a straight metal build, but we are running special metals in here as well. We are running shield energy, so we are able to search these with Soul Burst. So that means setting up his 230 damage attack isn't all that hard. We can set up a couple of these even from turn 2 if our opponent can't deal with this 250 HP. If we're able to get a Solgaleo GX out on turn 2, it means that we can be threatening 230 damage on turn 3. And then once we've used our attack and discarded our energy, we can just use his ability Ultra Road to retreat out or to switch out into another attacker. So all of the different things about this card all really work synergistically together. And it means that we can constantly stream attackers, constantly do these huge chunks of damage and really threaten our opponent's board position pretty much the whole game. Pairing with Solgaleo, we've got 2 other metal attackers. We've got 1 Genesect and 1 Scizor. Now, essentially, these sort of serve a dual purpose. One, if we can manage to get the Solgaleo set up turn 2, we want to have safe Soul Burst targets. We don't want to be attaching 2 or 3 energy to a Cosmog or a Cosmoem. We want to be attaching them to Solgaleos, but if we can't get multiple Solgaleos out on turn 2, which, because it's a rare candy deck, we may not be able to do, we want to have somewhere we can store these energies and we can use some attacks whilst we set up our later Solgaleos. So that's why we're running these 2 other metal attackers. So we've got Genesect. Essentially, his damage output is really, really nice because you can actually adapt it to how much you need to do. For 3 energy, his attack does 100 damage, and you can discard as many metal energy from Genesect as you want, and there's an extra 20 for each energy you discard. So that means we can really scale our damage to be able to deal with specific threats. And then with Scizor, we do have access to Steel Wing, of course, but with Gale Thrust, because we can constantly move every turn, we can always make sure we're using Gale Thrust to be able to do its maximum damage. What Scizor requires is for him to come from the bench into the active spot to then do this extra 60 damage with Gale Thrust, and we can do that because we can retreat and then use the Ultra Road ability, or we can use 2 of the Ultra Road ability to just switch between 2 Pokemon, and it counts for Gale Thrust, which means that we can always make sure Gale Thrust is maximising its damage. Also, because of that, it means that it's only a 2 energy attacker, so we can even just throw 1 energy onto Scizor with Soul Burst GX, and not worry about having to set him up straight away, because we just need to find 1 more energy on the next turn. So yeah, just having these other extra attackers means that we're not sort of attaching a load of energy to a Cosmog just for it to be knocked out. It's got 60 HP, so it can quite easily be knocked out. So it means we've got safe sort of targets to be able to attach our energy to in the early game, and if we manage to get a second Solgaleo set up around turn 2ish, we still have the option of attaching to Solgaleo with Soul Burst if we want to. Of course, rounding it off, we've got 2 Shaymin and 1 Hoopa EX. Obviously, in a deck like this, where you're going to want to find your rare candies and stuff, we need things like Shaymin to keep us cycling through the deck. And then Hoopa just means that on turn 1, we can make sure we can find these one-off EXs that are going to mean that we can safely attach these energy with Soul Burst, and we're not going to worry about just having to manually find them. We can just Hoopa, find everything, all of the attackers we want for the game, or at least for the early game whilst we set up more Solgaleos, to be able to attach our energy early on. Onto the trainers, we are running a 3-3 split of Sycamore and N. Obviously, because it's a bit more of a combo deck, we want to find our rare candies and our Solgaleo pieces. We don't always want to be Sycamoring in the early turns. Also, we want to try and preserve energy or keep it in the deck to be able to then Soul Burst for more value later on in the game or early on in the game. We don't want to have to discard 2 or 3 energy, because whilst we're running a high count, we want to be able to make every energy last and make sure we can attach as many energy as possible to be able to not only sort of use Solgaleo to take 2 to 4 prizes pretty much every game, but still have access to our other attackers as well. So that's why we've gone for a 3-3 split rather than a 4-2 split. Also, having 3N just means that we don't mind shuffling and saving our other resources for later, like other rare candies and stuff, to be able to set up more Solgaleos towards the mid to late game. So I think the 3-3 split is definitely sort of preferable, especially when we're also running 3 Skyla as well. This means that if we have just one of the pieces to be able to set up a Solgaleo in the early turns, as long as we've got a Skyla, we can search for either the rare candy or the Ultra Ball to find a Solgaleo or anything like that, to be able to just maximise our chances of finding this early Soul Burst, because it can really swing games. Attaching 7 energy by turn 2 can just really swing games. We've got 2 Lysandre just to be able to take on anything that our opponent throws at us, and then we can pick and choose our prizes towards the later game where maybe we're using our other attackers, or we've only got 1 more or enough energy to be able to set up 1 more Solgaleo. So it just means that we have access to whatever our opponent wants to sort of throw at us. And yeah, it's just a really, really good card at the moment. There's a lot of different things that are going to want to stall you out, and maybe you don't want to be facing what your opponent is trying to. Maybe you don't want to be taking prizes on what your opponent is attacking with, because this deck can quite easily kill Shaymin after Shaymin. We've got both of our EXs can take out Shaymins with their attacks, and then obviously Solgaleo can just blow up anything that has a high HP. So being able to take easier prizes on Shaymins also helps in the prize race. We've got one Professor Kukui, helps with buffing these guys' damage as well, but essentially it means that Solgaleo can hit that 250, meaning we can knock out other Solgaleo GXs, other Incineroar GX, for example, has 250. There's a lot of different decks that will be reaching the 250 mark, and having Kukui means that we are always able to reach that 250 mark. It also means that we are able to keep cycling through the deck even when we're doing this buff of 20. It's not like we're not doing anything else that turn. We're still getting the cycle. So yeah, it's really, really nice to be able to just make sure that we can keep cycling through the deck and we're not losing any tempo when we're taking this extra 20 damage for the knockout. Finally, we've got one OLympia. Paired with Ultra Road, it means that we can always Ultra Road back into our own sort of target that we want to. We don't have to have two Ultra Roads out to be able to go back into what we want to. Especially useful for the Scizor, because then we can Gale Thrust turn after turn and we have a searchable switch. But even though it's not crucial, simply because we do have the Ultra Road ability. And yeah, it means that we can just sort of be able to have another way of switching along with these Ultra Road abilities if our abilities are locked or whatever. It's just a nice sort of alternate switching card we have. We're running 4 VS Seeker, of course, to be able to reuse these supporters as well. So for things like that, that's why we're running things like the one of OLympia and the one of Kukui. So yeah, 4 VS Seeker, pretty standard. 4 Candy, of course, we want to be hitting this on turn 2. Between 4 Candy and 3 Skyla, we're going to be doing that pretty consistently. Similarly with 4 Ultra Ball, it just means that we're going to be able to find all of these pieces a lot easier. Ultra Ball also searches out our Hoopa, which sets up Shaymin draws and searching out other attackers as well. We've got 2 Timer Ball to be able to... It's another card that can search out our Cosmoem and Solgaleo. Again, if we have the piece, or if we have one of the pieces already, if we have the rare candy already, we just need 1 Heads to be able to set up a Solgaleo on turn 2. So it's just a really nice card and an evolution based deck. And then we've got 2 Level Ball to be able to make sure we can find at least 1 other Cosmog in the early turns, so we can always get 2 on our board in the early turns and make sure we're never just losing to not being able to set up a Solgaleo. If we can always have 2 on turn 1, we will always at least have 1 by turn 2, which means we will always be able to get into our Solgaleo turn 2 to be able to Soul Burst. Tool of choice, we've got 2 Weakness Policy. Obviously, with Solgaleo being weak to fire, and Volcanion being what's probably going to be one of the more popular decks, I think the Weakness Policy is really important at the moment. Without buffs, Solgaleo still gets one-shot by the Volcanions, so we want to be able to force them to have to expend energy to be able to use these steam ups and make sure they have to reach even though we're weak. Or we can also return knock them out with Solgaleos as well. It can be an awkward matchup, but with Weakness Policy, and it means that then they're very rarely one-shotting us if we're able to find this Weakness Policy, because they have ways of eventually reaching that damage, but it costs them a lot of resources. So it just means that the matchup isn't as weighted in their favour, because otherwise they would just need to steam up. They wouldn't even need to steam up, but they could steam up once if we have at least 2 shield energy on us to prevent them from knocking us out without them having to steam up. So that's why we're running the shield energy as well. But this way it means that they have to use 4 energy with 4 steam ups to be able to reach the 250 damage, which is just super, super strong. We can also preserve them early on with Genesect as well. We can throw one on if we're going to Sycamore, because Genesect's ability allows us to pick up the tool and use it later on, which is really, really important. We've also got 1 Floatstone, again with Ultra Road. It just means we can switch or Ultra Road into a target with a Floatstone, and then switch into whatever we want later on in the turn when we're just about to do our attack. So it's just really, really nice with an ability like Ultra Road, really. Finally, we've got 1 Super Rod to be able to keep cycling things back into the deck towards the mid to late game. Energy is really important for the deck. Solgaleo pieces is always important, and these specific attackers can be useful in their various matchups. So we want to be able to cycle all of that back in case we lose it in the early turns. And then finally, onto the energy, we are running 4 shield energy. 2 shields on a Solgaleo means that they have to at least use 1 steam up to knock us out if we don't have a weakness policy attached. And if we do have a weakness policy attached, even 1 shield energy means that they have to use something like Kukui to be able to one-shot us. So having shield energy just means we're out of range of some of these Volcanions, and in general it can just sort of screw up people's maths as well, because it's a -10 that people will forget about sometimes. So if you can find these guys early, which you can with Soul Burst, that's why we're able to run these shield energy. It means that we can really sort of throw our opponent's maths off, and they have to work on getting these knockouts in different ways and using more resources and such. So it means that we're more able to take 3 knockouts with either Solgaleo or a mix of Solgaleo and Genesect and Scizor to win the game outright. This deck struggles a little bit more with non-EX decks because Solgaleo obviously is kind of a blow everything up, and then you have to use a different attacker. So blowing everything up for 1 prize is really, really awkward. It can win against these non-EX decks, but it's more difficult, and you have to preserve more resources and use Scizor and Genesect more so in those matchups. And because of that, it means that it becomes more of a resource war, and that's where shield energy is also going to come into play. It means that your opponent has to spend more resources on knocking you out as well. So yeah, it's a really, really nice energy, especially as we can search them out with Soul Burst, and then it's complemented by 8 Steel energy or Metal energy, just so we always have this Soul Burst in the early turns, and we always have a lot of targets in the deck to set up these huge attackers in the early game with Soul Burst and sort of snowball our opponent from there. So yeah, I think Soul Burst is, or Solgaleo in general, but I think Soul Burst is one of my favourite GX attacks in the whole set. I think it's got so much potential, and it's a really, really strong attack. And I think this guy is just going to get better. I think once we move into a slower format, this will be one of the best GXs we've got, hopefully. I'm really hoping it is, because I think it's, like I say, got a lot of potential. Being able to attach 5 energy on turn 2 is just nuts. So having that potential in your deck is just kind of crazy in itself. But then having an attack that you can follow up with that does 230 damage, which essentially knocks out anything in the format, it means that we're such a powerhouse. We attach all of our energy, and then we blow anything up, and we do that 3 times and we win the game. It's a super simple sort of concept. It's just attaching a lot of energy and taking 3 knockouts on EXs. So yeah, it's such a strong sort of, that's the strong part about it, is simplicity. There's no real gimmicks here. The weakness policy isn't even a gimmick, it's just to protect us in a naturally awkward matchup, things like that. So yeah, it's just a super simple, super consistent list for you guys to try out, and it's definitely going to be one that I at least take to some league challenges as soon as Solgaleo is out, just because I think it's got a lot of potential and a lot of just raw power. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. I've been Jack from Omnipoke. If you have any questions about the deck, feel free to write them down in the comments. Me or Joe will get back to you pretty quickly. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. I've been Jack from Omnipoke, and I look forward to seeing you guys in another video.